does it really matter if he wins the FA Cup? Now, you may well remember, Louis van Gaal famously won the FA Cup and was sacked almost as he carried the trophy down the tunnel. I haven't seen you, Henry, since the Coventry game, which seems like eons ago, but was only last week as he was stumbling across the line in the London Marathon. Do you think Erik ten Hag was right to react the way he did to the criticism, first of all, of the Coventry performance?
Not particularly, no, because he just looks defensive. Again, yesterday he was in his press conference. There was some legitimacy with, he got booed when Kobbie Mainoo got taken off, and he had a legitimate point which he made afterwards. He said, look, he's a young player, feels some fatigue, fans need patience. But then he launched into this, the current Manchester United side are one of the most dynamic and entertaining teams in the league. They're entertaining because of the, probably for not the right reasons, for some of their chaotic defending. Mm-hmm. Again, there's some sympathy because he's missing 7 defenders. But, other teams have injury problems. But you just look at them tactically, they were so open in midfield that obviously they had issues with a lack of pace at the back. And then the mistakes. Onana made some good saves. But on the debit side, that challenge, and he got away with it.
Justice for what happened against Wolves at the start of the season.
Absolutely. And, to say, we're creating loads of chances and, we're so dynamic and entertaining. I thought Burnley could have won that. I thought Burnley were terrific.
A very good chance, although Onana did make some good saves as well.
He did. But then, I thought the best player on the pitch was Dara O'Shea. What good, defender he is. Yeah, absolutely. And Dooney, clearly the penalty, and he took it well as well. United and Ten Hag were appealing for a penalty, but what does Vitinha do in that position? Because it's so close, and he's actually, he's not in an unnatural position. He's not. It's like he's flagging down a taxi. It's actually quite close to him. So, yeah. But then Onana made another save, and really, that Manchester United fan you had on, they are loyal. They do back the manager home and away, but you can see their patience is being tested, and there were boos at halftime. The problem that Ineos have got: who do you naturally see as a successor? I understand the Southgate and the Potter connections with the incoming executives, but are they really top of the range?
Oh, don't start the Southgate argument again.
Well, where do you stand?
You can't get round to doing Southgate until the Euros, till after the Euros, because he won't decide anything till then. If he wins the Euros, you might have him as Man United manager. If he doesn't win the Euros, then you say, Man United were right not to go for him. In the meantime, I think they still wait to see, can Erik ten Hag to pull off some sort of miracle and change things around? I don't see it particularly. If Man United were to beat Man City comprehensively in the FA Cup final, would it change their opinion? Surely they've got to make decisions before that cup final. In
the age of PSR, winning the FA Cup doesn't mean too much. It's a bit
but
of glory,
beating Manchester
nice.
City would
psychologically,
be a bit of
yes,
a statement,
but
especially as they haven't got a European distraction, so City will put everything into that game.
But it's an issue they're nowhere near getting in the Champions League, which you almost, if you're at that level, you have to do it for PSR. So, look, if they do, it'd be a miracle if they beat City in the final. You just think there is sympathy. If Martinez had been, Lissandro Martinez had been fit, if Luke Shaw had been fit, if Luke Shaw is fit, then Marcus Rashford becomes the sort of more confident player because he's got Luke Shaw behind him. So you have to understand that, that frustration on his part. I just don't think he comes over particularly impressively in press conferences. I know it's his second language, but we know how eloquent the Dutch usually are. So, I'm a supporter of his, but I can see why the patience is running out with him. But again, it comes back to who comes in. Who has got the personality to deal with the players, to sort out so much of that? Obviously, Ashworth and others, Wilcox, will address that. But look, this is a problem of leadership of Manchester United, which you could argue stretches back to 2005 when the Glazers came in. And it's been allowed to drift. And you look at the squads that have been built and rebuilt, and there's about 4 or 5 managers' choices in that squad, which just needs trimming, clearing out, some of the young blood allowed to come through more from the academy, young hungry players brought in.
Quite a lot was made in the week by some organisations about the fact 3 media outlets got banned. Banned from asking questions by Ten Hag, not banned from going to the press conference itself. In this case, it was the Sun, it was the Mirror and the Manchester Evening News. Earlier in the season, I think ESPN and Sky were banned too. It's becoming a recurring theme. Hey, I'm not saying it didn't happen under Ferguson's era. In fact, it was even worse sometimes under Ferguson's era. You got kicked out altogether.
You could get a lifetime ban and then be back next week.
BBC were banned for 7 years by Alex Ferguson from talking to him. So it's not necessarily an unusual thing to happen at Man United, but it does smack a little bit of, I mean, a bit ridiculous when some of the questions and some of the articles written, for me, were fair comment. I have to say, I've talked to Neil Custis of The Sun about this. Now, he hasn't got a big problem with it. He says, these things happen at Man United. In the olden days, it wouldn't have even been a story. We'd just deal with it in-house. It wouldn't have made national news. These days, it does. But we are used to having spats with managers and sort of taking it on the chin and moving on. But it does strike me that it's a little bit desperate at this stage to act like that.
I think it's very desperate, and you have to establish whether it's the club or whether it's him. He should be going there and actually just fronting it out with some of the journalists if he's got issues with. Look, if he's falling out with the Manchester Evening News, which you would imagine a lot of Manchester, you don't fall out with the local paper. We saw that in Hull, and it was a mistake. I think that was
Manchester. To do with a tweet by Sam Muckers during the FA Cup, which said he's got to go. I think it said.
Well, if that's the opinion of someone who covers them day in, day out, then that's his opinion. Then go and have a coffee with him, or just sort of call him out in a press conference. Do it in the broadcast bit, because then it's a bit livelier. So I just hate doing that. Do you remember when we had that issue with Beckham? Beckham had an issue with the Daily Mail, and he said, "I'm not talking to the Daily Mail."
We united.
We stood up. Although there was one journalist who said, "How are we going to get the quotes?" But actually,
we stood
Beckham
up
then
and said we wouldn't talk to Beckham.
And then Beckham very graciously actually said, "Well, look, I respect that." I think he wrote about it in his book.
Us for standing
so maybe
up
there's an element of collectivity if you stand up on things like that, but honestly, falling out with journalists, I mean, you're effectively falling out with fans if you're saying that, because journalists ultimately the conduit to the fans.
I was listening to Simon Jordan the other day. He thinks it's fair enough, and it puts journalists in their place, because Simon, of course, isn't part of the media. He stands above all that and thinks we get what we deserve. He can criticise Man United's manager, but apparently journalists.
You see, I much prefer a manager, if he's got an issue with you, just calling you out there and then, whether it's in the cameras, whether it's in a corridor before, whether it's in a phone call, and said what you wrote was absolute nonsense and just embarrassing you. I had it with Roy Keane. When he was at Ipswich, he absolutely and I thought, well,
wasn't I there? Was it?
You were there. You were there. I looked around. I thought the boys are going to stand shoulder to shoulder with me, and you all sort of quivering behind potted plants.
The question was, what makes Man United players great managers?
From that '94 team.
Yeah, why are Man United players such great managers? And Roy Keane said, why? Who's been a great manager from that '94 team, Henry? And
didn't he have to go and ring up Steve Bruce or something? He was trying to loan a player off.
You couldn't come up with
one. My point is that was a very impressive Manchester United team, and what was it in the mindset of those, or because they'd learned under Sir Alex Ferguson, that they then went on and became managers?
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.